It is officially the week that we've been waiting all year for. It is draft week. We're going to find out where this rookie class is going to end up, all the players, what teams they're going to sit up for, and how it's going to change the NBA landscape with a really talented class coming in, obviously headlined by Cooper Flagg and then Dylan Harper, and then a number of other very talented players that will go in the lottery. And I think some players that'll go in the later parts of the first round and even into the second round that'll have a chance to be really good players and potentially impact fantasy basketball either way in the future or pretty quickly because some of these guys are a little bit older prospects. They're more NBA ready, and depending on where they land, should be able to make an impact pretty quickly. So we're all obviously really excited for that, and we will be doing more mock drafts and, of course, a lot of reactions and analysis after the draft over the next couple of days, and even after that. We're going to have some Dynasty rookie rankings on. We're going to have mock drafts for rookie Dynasty drafts after the draft. And then probably some new Dynasty rankings, other stuff like that over the next few weeks. So a lot of exciting content coming up. But we're going to take a look at today 5 players that I think are more win now prospects for Dynasty managers, players that you may be willing to draft a couple picks earlier if you are looking to compete next year in your Dynasty League, and then a couple players or 5 players that are more stash players, maybe players that could impact winning in year one, but are more likely to be maybe long-term projects or players that may take a couple years to figure things out, or just players that are pretty young that I think may not play a large enough role in year one to really impact things. Of course, landing spot will impact that as well. But yeah, we will talk about, so that'll be 10 prospects. We'll talk about 5 win now, 5 stash. Before we do that, I just wanted to remind you guys that BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball season in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news and scores, and even live in-game betting. From the MLB to UFC to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. And then in between the games, you can head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. And you can also head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay. So we're going to talk about, as I said, 5 win now, 5 stash picks. We're going to start with just some of the win now prospects. And this doesn't mean that they're not going to hold long-term value. This just means that I think these prospects are going to play more or impact the game more during the rookie season than probably the 5 prospects we talk about after that. And then anyone we don't talk about is probably somewhere in between or outside of being measured by the same standards as everyone else, aka Cooper Flagg. He is both a win now and a win future prospect, and he is one. We're not going to talk about him today because, yes, he is number 1. Cool. All right. So I think one of the win now prospects is Collin Murray-Boyles, and depending on where he lands, he could be a guy that we take maybe with the number 3 pick in a Dynasty rookie draft, maybe a couple picks after. Could go anywhere from like top 5-ish, maybe just anywhere in the lottery. Can't really see him slipping far past like 12 to Chicago. There's a couple of very interesting fits. I think we've talked about this because this is where he landed in our mock draft, the community mock draft, but to Brooklyn at number 8. I think it'd be a really good opportunity for him to play a lot as a rookie and impact the game a lot. And I think that would be an ideal spot for him to land in year one to really maximize his skill set in the sense that he can get defensive stats, he can pass, he can have an opportunity to score. And I think on Brooklyn, he would be asked to do a little bit more, which would be a great thing for him statistically. This past season at South Carolina, he averaged 16.8 points, 8.3 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.3 blocks. He was also the focal point of that offense. He was the best player on that team by far. Stepping into Brooklyn, he would obviously have more help. So he wouldn't be the number one scoring option, but I think he would get more of an offensive opportunity than he would in a number of other teams. And he would play enough and be one of their best defenders immediately. So he'd be able to get some of those defensive stats as well. So in redraft leagues, I think he could be the number 2 rookie that gets drafted, depending on where some of the other centers land. In Dynasty leagues, I think there's a case for him to go number 3. And if you're on a win now, or you have a win now Dynasty team, trading up for Collin Murray-Boyles could end up being really worth it, depending on what you have to give up. But I think he is definitely a win now prospect. Also, I don't think that he's 20 years old. Like, just turned 20 years old. So he's not old. Like, he still has a lot of upside here to be a really, really good player for a really long time. So this isn't me saying that he doesn't hold long-term dynasty value either. I just think that he's more NBA ready than some of the other prospects that are going to go around him. All right, next player we're going to talk about is Clifford from Colorado State, who I think is maybe the definition of a win now dynasty prospect in this class. He fits that mold pretty well, being a 23-year-old. So he's quite a bit older. I think I did this because he went to the Thunder in our community mock, which I said I didn't love the fit for him from a statistical standpoint, but I like the fit. Obviously, whoever OKC gets, we're probably going to say that was a good pick. How do we let that happen? But Clifford was incredibly productive this past season for Colorado State. Did a number of things across the board, averaged 18.9 points, 9.6 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.8 threes per game. Pretty good shooting splits. Ideally, I'd like to see Clifford end up on a team that is not a rebuilding team, even though that would be a good situation for him to be productive, but a team that needs to fill a hole but is ready to compete. So OKC doesn't fit that because they don't really have that spot in the starting lineup that Clifford could fill immediately. Who could that be? I think, it's not a guarantee. I think Chicago would be intriguing. I don't think that's a guarantee he would start, but I think he could compete for a starting job in Chicago. Same thing with San Antonio. I don't think I would start him in San Antonio, but we'll see once they get done making moves. Maybe they trade away some sort of package centered around Devin Vassell and picks to get Kevin Durant, in which case maybe they do start Clifford at the 3 next to De'Aaron Fox and either Castle or Harper. Not sure. It could be intriguing. That's an interesting spot. Maybe potentially Memphis. That could be a pretty good spot. And then also Miami at 20. I think that'll be a good spot for anyone that they end up taking. But Clifford, did a number of things in college that will translate well to the NBA. And we're looking for him to be on a team that's looking to compete, that also would have room to have him be part of the rotation. And a number of the teams picking around where he should be going, which would be kind of anywhere in the teens, don't necessarily have that. Like, just starting at 13, he wouldn't start over Dyson Daniels, Zachary Reese, or Jalen Johnson. San Antonio, potentially, depending on what else happens this summer. Doesn't happen in OKC. Maybe in Memphis. I don't think that it happens in Minnesota where he steps in and starts. Don't think that happens. I mean, could be, but that would probably require Anthony Edwards becoming like their point guard or just running that position. And I don't really see that happening. Washington and Brooklyn at 18 and 19 would be phenomenal spots for him to land and step in and be productive. But those teams are probably better off getting a player a few years younger. Specifically for Washington, they drafted, I think they had 4 first-round picks in the roster from last year because they traded for A.J. Johnson. And Clifford's a couple years older than all those guys. So I think I'd rather see them go somebody at least a couple years younger. Like, they could take a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old. That doesn't have to be an 18 or 19-year-old, but someone that's more in line with the timeline for some of those other guys. But then Miami at 20, and then Utah at 21, Atlanta back up at 22. I don't see him falling that far, though. I would be shocked if he makes it past Miami at 20. But I do really like that landing spot for him to be productive in year one and be considered a win now prospect. All right, moving on. The next player we're going to talk about is Walter Clayton Jr. From Florida, who went to Brooklyn in our community mock. Was obviously incredible at Florida last season and helped bring them a national championship. Was a really, really strong shooter. Averaged 18.3 points, 3.7 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.2 steals, and 3 threes per game. A lot of the point guards in this draft class are going to struggle early on. And we'll talk about that later when we get into more of the stash players. But Walter Clayton Jr., I think, is going to step in and bare minimum, depending where he lands, be a backup point guard. If there's the minutes for him, he'll be able to fill a backup point guard role. And if there's minutes for him, he'll be able to fill a starting point guard role. Where could that be? I know Orlando just traded for Desmond Bane, so now they have Suggs and Bane there in the backcourt, but Walter Clayton Jr., I think, would be a backup point guard there and could, as a really strong floor spacer, when we've seen Jalen Suggs have a number of injury issues in recent seasons, could we see Walter Clayton Jr. thrive in that role and potentially start part of the season, depending on health for other players? Sure. I think the Brooklyn picks at 26, 27, and even up to 19 are all intriguing for him to step in and start. Same thing with Utah at 21, just them needing a point guard. They've got a number of players they've tried to make it work with, including Isaiah Collier, who's a really strong playmaker. But I think that taking Walter Clayton Jr. could be intriguing there. Atlanta has, if you're still a Kobe Buffkin believer, and I'm not saying I'm out on him, but it is a new regime now, as opposed to the one that drafted him. Potentially, maybe they aren't believers in Kobe Buffkin and decide to take Walter Clayton Jr. at 22 to be Trae Young's backup. Could be interesting. I don't know. Maybe he gets... I don't think you would want to play them together because Walter Clayton Jr. isn't a massive guard. So probably don't love that fit, but he could probably get 15 minutes per game there. So not a great spot. And then even down to the end of the first round, I don't know how far he would slide, but Boston, Phoenix, and the Clippers with 28, 29, and 30, I think are all pretty intriguing spots for Walter Clayton. Probably Boston the least of those, but Phoenix, who is their point guard? They didn't have a true solution this past season. I think Devin Booker ended up being their best option, but I think Walter Clayton Jr. would be a home run hit for them there. And the Clippers obviously have Harden, but he could definitely play a large role with the Clippers. I think Phoenix would be a really interesting option for Walter Clayton, but a really good source of points, threes, and assists in year one, which is hard to find for most point guards because they come in and it takes some time to figure it out. As an older prospect, I feel more confident that Walter Clayton Jr. could be productive quicker. All right, we're going to talk about another point guard who's also an older prospect that was really effective this past season. He is 23 years old, and this is Cam Jones that we're talking about. So statistically is really where he popped because I'm pulling up the numbers now. He averaged 19.2 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.9 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.9 threes per game. The shooting percentage was pretty poor, 31.1% from three, 64.8% from the line. It's not great. But what we really enjoy is the assists. And I think that's why, for some of the same reasons I just mentioned for Walter Clayton, but probably a little later, now it could be end of the first round, maybe into the second round, we see Cam Jones get selected and potentially be a backup, maybe even a starting point guard, depending on where he ends up. Could be Phoenix at 29. I don't think he would be a lock to start immediately, but depending on what they get back in a Kevin Durant trade, it's not out of the question. Start of the second round, Minnesota, Boston, 2 Charlotte picks, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Detroit. Not a ton of landing spots for him to step in and start immediately, but he, I think, could be a player that maybe plays a reserve role and then gets the start if the starting point guard's injured, and could be a really, really strong source of assists. That's what he did in college, was able to really rack up the dimes at Marquette, especially this past season. Let's see, he had 5 games with double-digit assists, which included a triple-double against Purdue. So, yeah, the assist numbers were really, really strong. And I think the fact that, the difference between him and someone like a Ryan Nembhard, who was, not almost double the assists per game, is that Cam Jones could be a first-round pick. And I think Ryan Nembhard is more of a late second-round pick, probably late second-round pick at this point, but had to really work to get his name in the draft board at all. Was potentially looking more of an undrafted free agent early on in the process, but Cam Jones would, I think, have more investment from a team into looking to get him minutes early on, and as an older prospect, should be more NBA ready. All right, one more win now pick, and I'm trying to not just pull the top names, so we're gonna go with a big man here, which I think you're gonna find that a lot of the big men are more NBA ready. Obviously, it's not easy, but stepping in to play center is, it's still not the easiest position, but we see more rookie centers have success than we do rookie point guards, because even if they're not as effective as they will be after a few years of figuring things out, they can still grab rebounds, block shots, and shoot a high field goal percentage. Amari Williams from Kentucky, kind of interesting to look at, but I think that he has a number of tools that can make him really effective at the next level, depending on where he ends up. And a lot of mocks could have him go anywhere in the second round, but potentially even late second round. 7-footer. He's 23 years old as well. Averaged 10.9 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.2 blocks in just 22.8 minutes per game this past season. So that's a really high rebounding rate and a pretty good passer for a center. He did have a triple-double against Ole Miss in just 26 minutes. While in SEC play, had in the NCAA tournament 2 games with double-digit rebounds. Just a beast on the glass and a 7-footer. So where could he end up that would make him an intriguing option? I think 55 to the Lakers would be ideal, because they don't really have a great center option. That's one of the holes they need to fill this summer, and they have 1 draft pick to do it. So they'll probably address it more so through a trade or a free agent signing. But looking at the way they did that, there's no guarantee they're going to be able to get a really effective center, and Amari Williams, if he's there for them at 55, could be a really good option. If the Lakers take a center at 55, I think that player would be worth considering a good bit earlier in a Dynasty rookie draft, just because it's a really good opportunity for minutes. I think Phoenix at 52 is also a pretty intriguing option. Nick Richards is there. I'm trying to think of who the other centers were that were there. Mason Plumlee, I think, was in the minute split there. Let me see if I can remember, because I feel like there was one more center there that was looking to split minutes as well. So let me see if I can figure this out while I'm saying this. But I think Amari Williams to the Lakers, potentially to Phoenix. Oso Ighodaro, that's the other guy I was thinking of, who they just took in the second round this past season. But we'll see. So maybe Amari Williams to Phoenix in the second round isn't as good as the Lakers, but I don't think any of those guys in Phoenix last year truly established themselves as, hey, they need minutes, no matter what, which is why they weren't able to make it to the playoffs. But I think Amari Williams could be intriguing there. There's a couple of other interesting spots. Maybe Milwaukee if Brooke Lopez leaves at 47. That one could be interesting. It may take a pretty specific spot, but I think Amari Williams' statistical output this last season at Kentucky makes him an intriguing option depending on where he lands to be a win now pick. So if you're in your 30-team league and you're trying to compete for a championship next season and you have a second-round pick or something, I think Amari Williams, depending on where he ends up, could be a pretty intriguing option. I think Golden State at 41 is also an intriguing option because they have Trace Jackson Davis and Quentin Post, but could be an opportunity for a number of other centers as well. Whoever they end up taking, it could be Yannick Coded, Niederhauser, Hansen Yang. But I think Amari Williams is a really win now, like NBA ready prospect in the sense that he is older. He's 7 feet. He passed well at Kentucky. He rebounded incredibly well. So there's an opportunity for him. I like it. All right, we're going to call them stash picks just to have a way to look at it. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be year one production or that they're going to take forever to figure things out. But players that I think may struggle early on and that their best days are ahead of them, or that their best days are way ahead of them, not immediately ahead of them. I guess that's probably the way to put it when none of these guys have been drafted yet. First one is Jeremiah Fears, who I've talked about a good bit as one of, if not my favorite prospect in this class, relative to consensus draft position or however everyone else views him. I think that he's an incredibly dynamic offensive force that can get to the rim really well, create his own shot. I think there's a difference between players that can hit tough shots and players that can create good shots for themselves. And I think hitting tough shots just comes with developing as a shooter, but creating, I think, is a little harder to just kind of figure out in the NBA. But I think Jeremiah Fears did that incredibly well in college, and he just wasn't super efficient as a small 18-year-old playing in a tough conference. I've probably said this a few times on this show, but there's a couple spots that I would like to see him end up. I think Brooklyn at 8 is a really intriguing one. Maybe Utah at 5, Washington at 6. I think I've liked a little bit more recently. Probably one of those 3 is probably my ideal landing spot for him, in the sense that there's other potential point guard options there. But I think Brooklyn's probably my favorite spot because I think he would get a ton of reps year one, and it's not going to go well, but it'll really pay dividends in the long run for him as a prospect. Same thing with Washington and Utah. He would get a ton of minutes. I just think that there's more competition for on-ball reps there than there is in Brooklyn. So I'd love to see him land there and just develop over the next few years as they continue to add talent. But Jeremiah Fears, I guess I'll read out his numbers because I've been doing that for everyone. Averaged 17.1 points, 4.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.6 steals, and 1.1 threes this past season. 3.4 turnovers were not great. Which made the assist turnover ratio not great. 43.4% from the floor and 28.4% from 3 were not great. But again, he was terrible at the rim, even though he got there at will. But the free throw percentage being strong gives you an indication that he can shoot, and that 3-point percentage should not look at like 28% in the NBA, especially as he continues to develop. All right, next player we're going to talk about is Yon Bearing, who is a pretty raw prospect. There is a good bit to like about him as a shot blocker. Let me see if I can. Where is he on this list? I'm trying to find him on Data Baller where they have him. Oh, there he is. He didn't have a picture. But we're still going to throw it on the screen anyway. You can see there's not a ton of information on him right here, but he is incredibly young, pretty raw prospect. Average, let's see, he's played in Croatia, but is French. Averaged 5.4 points, 4.9 rebounds, 1.4 blocks in 18.8 minutes per game. So not great, just counting stats, but a lot of upside as a rebounder and as a shot blocker, and is a athletic center. This listing here has him as 6'10", but I don't know because I don't think he participated in the combine, so that probably isn't the most official listing for his height on Tankathon. But I think there's a lot to like about him, depending on where he lands. I don't think that this is a prospect that's going to step in and just play a lot as a rookie. He is probably more of a long-term project, but after a couple of years, maybe sitting on a bench for an NBA team and sitting on the bench in your Dynasty league, could be a really good, really impactful defender at center. And I don't think there's necessarily a bad landing spot for him. I mean, maybe you could argue that OKC isn't the best landing spot because Chet Holmgren's there. But even then, like, I don't think that Yon Bearing is a guy that's going to really play a ton over the next at least 2 seasons. He might get reps now. Well, if it's a team like a Brooklyn or a Utah, then yeah, he might get a good bit more reps for them than that he would on any other team that is trying to win. So I think ideally, if we do want to see him just get NBA reps, then probably Brooklyn or Utah would be the ideal spot, maybe even to Washington at 18. But I think I'd rather see him go to maybe even – I'm trying to think, because Utah obviously has Walker Kessler, Kyle Filipowski. Brooklyn has Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharpe. So he really would probably be a stash basically for these NBA teams. And when I say stash, I don't mean stash overseas. I just mean develop in the G League and sit on the bench as he gets stronger and older. But there's enough upside here to be really intrigued by him. He didn't play a ton this past season, and I don't think that he's going to immediately step into a large role in the NBA, but there's a lot of upside here to like, and that it's in categories that'll translate well for fantasy basketball. Got a few more guys to talk about, and this is a player that I think could make an impact on the court pretty early on, but it's probably going to be in more of a low usage role, and that's Carter Bryant from Arizona, who didn't play a ton, didn't play a significant role for them during his rookie season, but has some really, I guess, intriguing attributes. Almost just a touch under 7-foot wingspan, 39.5-inch vertical, only played 19.3 minutes per game this past season for Arizona, averaged 6.5 points, 4.1 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, and just under a steal, and then 1.1 threes. Shooting splits weren't ideal, but a low usage role kind of does that. It's maybe hard to develop a rhythm, especially if you're coming in as believe he was a 5-star, maybe a 4-star, but like a coveted prospect that was obviously having the ball in his hands all in high school, and then that role changes in the NBA. But I think he could step in and play potentially a low usage, even if it's high-minute role in the NBA, and just be a really good defender. Maybe that allows him to get some defensive stats and have some early production. But I think if he's going to develop and be what you're hoping for in a lottery pick, and that's like a future high-level starter at least, the offense is probably going to take some time to develop. But he could still be productive defensively early on. So maybe this isn't even fair to call him a stash, but since he didn't play a significant role in college, he's young, and he may end up on a team where he doesn't start, and it takes a few years to start. Well, I'm going to call him a stash for that reason. Could be 10 to Houston, where he steps in, is able to play 15 to 20 minutes per game off the bench for the defense. Could be a team like Portland or Chicago, who it's probably a similar role, but maybe he gets more touches on offense. Could be up to Toronto, kind of similar. So like, I think that whatever team selects him is going to be looking forward to using his defense immediately. And maybe that leads to defensive stats. Maybe it doesn't. But as he develops offensively, I think in a few years, we could see him be a really well-rounded, impactful fantasy option for dynasty managers. All right, 2 more guys to talk about. The first one being, and I think we'll see if we can get some good stats on him, but I don't know if we have too much, but Noah Essen, who is in a pretty similar boat to Carter Bryant. He is a full year younger. He won't turn 19 until December, playing in Germany, but he's French and if he makes the national team, but will play for the French national team. The numbers here on Tankathon, and I don't think this is for the full season. But what I have here is 12.4 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 1.4 steals in 18 games. I'm going to see if I can find his full stats. Maybe I'll use Real GM to see if I can get that. All right, let's see. Yeah, this is more like it. 10.8 points, 5 rebounds, 1.2 assists, just a touch under a steal. This was in 59 games this season. So more inclusive of what his full season looked like. But had some really up and down performances in the postseason. But I think a very intriguing upside here as a rebounder, as a defender. I think he has a good bit to work on on offense, but I still think he'll be able to make an impact. But we could see him as he gets older really develop at a rapid rate. I think he can make an impact early on, but it may not show up as much in the box score. But definitely a player that at 18 years old is worth stashing in your Dynasty League. And again, stash maybe isn't the best term here, but a player that's more of a long-term project that may not be a home run hit in year one, may take time to figure things out. But a lot to like here from Noah Essen. All right, the last player that we're going to talk about is another guy that played a minimal role. I'm not even seeing much on this page from Data Baller, but Hugo Gonzalez. And I'm going to try and pull up his numbers on Real GM as well, but there isn't great. Like the numbers here weren't phenomenal, but he played on a competitive team and played a very small role. So in 69 appearances for Real Madrid this season, played 10.7 minutes per game, averaged 3.4 points, 1.8 rebounds, poor shooting splits. But there's talk of him being a late first round or early second round pick. And I think he's a pretty intriguing player, but obviously it's a good bit about the upside. And I think he can do a good bit on both ends. It can be impactful, I think, in transition. We'll see how much his shot is able to improve after a pretty poor shooting season this past year. But depending on where he lands, and I think this might be, again, more of the definition of a stash. So if he is a late first round pick / early second round pick, probably isn't going to play a ton in year one unless he lands with one of the Brooklyn picks, maybe in Charlotte at 33 or 34. But I think, honestly, the Charlotte spot may be ideal because he could be fun playing next to LaMelo Ball, but would not play a lot in year one. But as he continues to age, and maybe, things change and LaMelo isn't there anymore, but I think he would play a decent amount in Charlotte, and we could really get a better feel for him than we did this past season in a very, very, very limited role. And then Brooklyn would be great, but a lot of the other teams, he probably would be just sitting on the bench for a couple of years as he develops. But I think he's talented enough to be worth hanging on to see how things pan out. All right, that was 5 players that are, I'd say, more win now, 5 players that are more long-term projects, but I still think are intriguing in Dynasty leagues. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at NoRuben22. We'll continue talking about the draft over the next couple of days until it starts, and then we'll continue talking about it throughout it and after it. Of course, there's going to be a lot of draft content and more perspectives, hopefully more guests on here, so you don't have to hear me yap for half an hour. But that's going to do it for this one. I appreciate you guys, as always, for listening and checking this out. Any likes, comments, and subscribes would help me out a ton. But that's going to do it. I'm saying it for the 3rd time. But I will see you guys next time.